Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm hoping you're able to hear me. And just kind of a little technical thing, I'm hoping that you all see on your screen a PowerPoint slide that says KCREACH Faculty Online Showcase. I'm recording this session, so at this time, we'll provide a link to that later on. So I'm hoping you see that. The other thing is, during this session, if you do have a question within the Zoom environment, there is a chat tool. If you would like to use that chat tool to ask any questions, we'll be monitoring that during our session today, and hopefully we'll get back with you as we go through the session. I'm looking outside and the sun is shining, but I hear the weather may be changing, so hopefully you'll be able to enjoy this today. Today we're joined by Dr. Adrienne Johnson, who's an assistant professor at Missouri Western State University. I'm going to do a short little commercial like I always do, and I'll turn it over to Adrienne here in a second. These faculty showcases are made possible by KCREACH, which is a consortium here in the Kansas City Midwest area. And one of the ways that we're able to do that is that we're very conscious about quality of online learning, and so we have membership opportunities for people, different colleges and universities, and so we have $5,000 membership option that includes marketing through KCPT here in the Midwest area. We also have an affiliate membership, which is half that you get all of the benefits except for the KCPT broadcast information. If you're interested in some of the benefits about quality assessment, we have lots of opportunities. We actually share training between the organizations. Many of our groups are part of the Online Learning Consortium, and we've attended various conferences throughout the year, and we have a close membership, many of us, with OLC itself. Some of us also have a lot of history with Quality Matters, and so we have an interest in quality education, so there's a lot of history there that organizations are more than happy to share with each other. If you have more questions about KCREACH or the quality initiatives that we have here, I'd invite you to reach out to either myself, Dr. Ed Lovett, or Dr. Tim Peterson, who's our Director of Quality Assessment here at KCREACH. You can also take a look at our KCREACH website to get a little better idea of some of the different resources and benefits that membership can provide you. Today's showcase presenter is Dr. Adrienne Johnson. She's an assistant professor at Missouri Western University in Educational Department. She earned her PhD in linguistics. I don't know if I can say that, but at the University of Kansas, she's worked in education for over 15 years. She's worked in many areas of education, including providing sustained, content-based, technology, professional development, K-12 teachers, assisting higher education, instruction in ESL, and developing online courses in multiculturalism and graduate courses in curriculum design. Dr. Johnson, welcome. Thank you very much for sharing your course today. I'm going to go ahead and kind of stop my sharing if you want to go ahead and take over, and we'll continue.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Lovett. I'm happy to be here, and I'm also happy to answer any questions that anyone has. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I have a very short, Nick Edwards at our IMC department asked me to talk about was student involvement in distance courses. And then I'll also show you a little bit after this on my actual Moodle, which is the platform we use, my Moodle site, as well as any syllabi or anything else you want to see. So I come from an education background. I'm a teacher at heart, which means that my first priority is that students are learning, and they're learning in the way that best suits them. So when I think about student involvement in distance courses, I think about, there are some benefits to the online format. There are also some drawbacks, and then there are some solutions to address some of those drawbacks. So I'm just really going to briefly highlight some of these factors. One of the benefits of the online courses, and when I started teaching online as a teacher, I want to have students face-to-face with me. I want to be able to reach out and and grab them. But you can't do that in the online format. And I was worried at first about that, but I found there were a lot of benefits to it. So the flexibility is obviously really important, both for the students and the instructor. That's one of the main benefits, right, of online courses. There's a lot of opportunity, though, for practical application that doesn't occur in the face-to-face classroom. So whereas my students are with me face-to-face, they have to sit in a classroom with me for an hour and 20 minutes, and we talk and we can do activities. It's all within the confines of that classroom. For my distance students, I can actually have them go out and do tasks and have them do field work to get out in the field and apply some of the learning that they are gaining through the course. There's also, and this is something that was really highlighted to me this semester when I had a face-to-face classroom and an online classroom teaching the same content, was that my online students, I'm able to formatively assess them every single day with every single student. And that's not something I can do in the face-to-face class, because we can have a discussion, but I might have 5, 10, 15 students participate in that discussion. There's always going to be a few who are not participating. With my online classes, they're forced to participate actively, all of them, every single one of them, so I can really track their learning. So I'd say those are the main benefits that I found and that I really enjoy with teaching these online courses. In terms of drawbacks, as a teacher, I'm always concerned in the fact that my students, all of them learn differently. They all have different strengths. So the fact of the matter is that with online courses, they're really heavily dependent on reading and writing. And while those are really important skills for sure, some of my students who might be better able to actually demonstrate skills, or might be more inclined to learn through interaction, they sometimes can struggle in that online environment and fall behind. There's also a few opportunities for real-time feedback, at least in the more traditional online format. A lot of the feedback's delayed by a couple days, even a week, maybe more than that in some cases. It's also sometimes can be difficult to develop a peer community or support system because the students aren't sitting right next to each other, able to have side conversations before class and after class and really get to know each other on a personal basis. And then it can be difficult to assess skill-based development. So again, if all they're doing is posting something that they've written, it can be difficult to see if they have a skill and they can actually demonstrate or create something or give a presentation. At least that's what I thought. So I did find some solutions to these issues, though. Some of the solutions I found, some of them are asynchronous tools and some of them are synchronous options. So I'm going to just quickly walk through how I use each of these and what I found was successful and what I found was not as successful. So in terms of asynchronous tools, obviously you can do video recorded lectures. That's pretty traditional and it works. You know, it's nicer. It's sometimes nicer for the students to actually see me explaining things rather than read it out of a text. It's more engaging for some students. Sometimes it better fits their learning styles. But it really is still pretty dry material sometimes, no matter how exciting I try and make it. So what I started to doing is actually occasionally having peer taught lessons where students would record themselves teaching an assigned content area. That, you know, they'd give them the background reading, I'd support them, but then they'd actually create a presentation and a discussion. And it just gave some variety to the class, and it's something that we do in face-to-face classrooms that I was trying to bring into the online environment. Similarly, I teach in an education department, so I'm training teachers, and the main way to become a teacher is to get up and actually teach. So it's really hard to do that in the online format, I thought, until I realized that they could record themselves teaching with fake students. You know, sometimes they would have a fake audience that we couldn't see. Sometimes I had students who would go and find their peers and tell them to act like, you know, first graders or high schoolers, which is good and bad. But then they would demonstrate how they would actually teach a lesson in real time. And that worked really, really well. The students liked it. We got a lot out of it. In fact, you know, I was having a discussion with our IMC department with Nick and talking about how sometimes those demonstrations, they were actually better than what I would see in the classroom because they were able to practice beforehand. We'd also, you can use these video recordings to talk about projects, both on my side to explain a project, but also on the student side to explain projects that they're working on. And again, it's something different than that written back and forth. I have used wikis in my classroom to increase some student interaction and collaboration. It's great for project building and collaborative group work, and to give feedback on complex projects that might have videos and written materials and photos all integrated into one. I did find wikis to be cumbersome for my students. I like the fact that it's in a closed environment, so I did consider more blog-like formats, but the concern I do have, because we're working with students, is that I worried about them putting information out there about their schools or classrooms or students that was out in the public domain. So that's why I like the wiki, because it was closed within the classroom, but it was a little bit cumbersome. So at the moment, I'm kind of moving away from that format and looking for something else to replace it. So I'm always open to ideas there. One of the tools that I am exploring and going to implement this semester in the classroom is VoiceThread, because it's like that recorded lecture format where I can get information out, but I'm able to interact with the students, and there's a lag time, so it's not real time, but they're able to respond to questions within the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm able to see where they're having confusions or where they're asking questions or making comments, and I like that. It also holds them accountable for watching and engaging in recorded lectures, which when I look at my stats online, I see that some of my lectures are not always watched, and so I can track that, and that's okay. And then finally, a synchronous tool that's my favorite by far out of all of these tools for online teaching is video conferencing. So it's using Zoom like we're using right now. I do this with my students and I love it. They love it, I love it. It has the best of both worlds. I tell them they can come into class in their PJs. I don't have to see what they're wearing below the waist, but they, as long as they watch the background of what we have had some issues with that, but we are able to interact. We're able to see each other face to face to get across to some of the same concepts. We're able to have real-time demonstrations and get questions and answers and conversations going through those demonstrations. I can also, because of the way I run my courses, so that they can be kind of complex. So I have blended courses, so that are cross-listed. So I have undergraduate students who are required to come to class in person. And I have graduate students who are, the program is 100% online, so they could never step foot on campus if they chose. And I have these classes in the same, it's the same class. So what I do is I have my undergraduate students come to our conference room where we have the Zoom set up. They sit in the conference room with me, and then I put Zoom on. And so I have my graduate students join via Zoom. Some actually do show up in person because I schedule this during these sessions during the evening. And then I also have to record the Zoom session because the students who can't come at that specific time, I have to give them an option. So I have a recorded Zoom session or live Zoom session and then an in-person session all going on at the same time. But what I can do in that format is I can, every so often, I can have them do group work. So my in-person students will group together and discuss a problem or work on an issue. Whereas my Zoom students, I'll just lower the volume on them and then they can talk to each other online. And I've actually, as classes have grown, I've been trying to figure out how to even break those Zoom students up. And I've thought about having them exchange, either get on Skype or exchange phone numbers. And then when they break off, talk that way or FaceTime. So that's something I'm still working on, is how to break that into smaller groups, that Zoom session component. So it works great for community building. There's nothing like seeing another face to really get to know somebody and to be able to feel like you have that support system when you're in an online environment. So a few challenges that I've encountered as I've been setting up this process. This has been probably, it's been about a 3 or 4 year process that I've been really moving towards my current place that in which I'm teaching and the tools I'm using, and it's an ongoing process. Equipment's really important. So for those Zoom sessions, when I have in-person students and online students, I really need a good speaker system so that the Zoom students can hear my online or my in-person students, who are sometimes quieter. So, you know, their voices aren't picked up by a mic unless it's a good one. You know, there needs to be reliable internet, of course. We've had, you know, some problems. Zoom does take a lot of bandwidth, so that can be an issue on our side, but also on the student side. If they have poor bandwidth, it can interfere with the entire session and can be a little bit disastrous. Technology training for both myself, you know, I had to learn these new tools, but also for the students. So they're using that video recording software that we use is Panopto. So they needed to be trained on Panopto. Zoom is luckily pretty intuitive, but any other of these tools that we use, it does take a learning curve. So usually that first week of class, I have a few items that I set up, and I can talk about kind of my setup in a moment here. You need really immediate technical support. We have awesome technical support through the Instructional Media Center here at Missouri Western. They have done everything, has responded immediately. They'll stay for my evening sessions and help me out on those first days and come to class and talk to students and respond to student questions immediately. It's invaluable, really, that support is. Scheduling, as I mentioned, can be an issue. Evening sessions are critical. I found out that Monday evenings is one of the best evenings because there are not religious activities going on or other activities usually on Monday evenings. I do mine anywhere from the 5:30 realm to about 8:30 because we also have a lot of families that have children and they want to put their children to bed, so they come to my session between dinner time basically and bedtime. And then I also record my Zoom sessions for the students who can't join us. So that's the quick overview that I have. I'm happy to answer any questions, or I can go into some of the preparation work that I do.
Adrian, I started writing down notes, and then you started answering a lot of the questions. The Panopto product is really, you're using Zoom. Are you then taking these recordings from Zoom and then uploading them into Panopto? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So those Zoom sessions, when they're recorded, they're huge. They're huge files. They take a long time to download and record, which is also something to consider about where, the professor is versus where the recording's being done and who's going to download and convert that file, because it can take up to an hour or so, which in the evenings, I don't like to stay in the evenings for that time. So you either have to go back the next day or ask somebody, instructional media, to convert those files and upload them. But then yes, so Panopto, you can just transfer them over to Panopto. You can drag and drop them into Panopto pretty easily and then share them with students at that point.
Another question, I know that on our campus we are offering a public speaking class, and I know that when you go through teacher training, I remember many, many, many years ago, that experience of standing before your peers and sort of getting that. You said you do demonstrations. Is there a way that you maybe include both body language, maybe in a camera, and maybe like a PowerPoint? Have you had to deal with that at all?
Yeah, I think that a lot of, even you'd think that for teachers that they'd be used to standing up in front and giving presentations, but many of them, they like standing up in front of children, but not their peers. So they definitely, we have to talk about, we have one class where they have to give a presentation to a board, like a school board, so a very higher level type of presentation. And so we talk about, they have to show a PowerPoint and we see their face, they have to dress professionally, they have to, it's within a specific time limit. I give them a lot of guidelines of what that looks like. And I also, part of their grade is that it's really a practice presentation, and you can tell pretty easily if it's practiced or not. So I tell them, make sure you get out a stopwatch, time yourself, and I'm going to cut you off if it's short or if it's long. So
good. You'd also talked about, the students able to visit with each other. I think Zoom does provide a free license for individuals. I think there's like a 45-minute limit.
Okay.
So, they could have their own accounts and maybe invite each other out and record that. I think the major difference between what we use as an institution is we don't have a time limit, as the free Zoom account, I think, has a 45-minute limitation. So we at our college have kind of promoted that because they're used to using Zoom, and you might look at that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's incredible. That's a great idea.
So, you do have some students that are on campus, but, before classes begin, I mean, right now on our campus, classes will begin next Tuesday. How do you, invite them? How do you get them to know what is expected of them and introducing them to your course?
Yeah, so what I do is the majority of my students are definitely not on campus, and we've had some out of state and even out of country. So coming in to campus is definitely not an option. What I do is I do a few things. So one of the things I found is that students they poke around. So this is our Moodle site. And what they'll do is they'll log into the course. And what I found is that if I can post just a general welcome message, a week or 2 weeks out from the semester, a lot of the students will see that, and it's a great chance for them to say, yes, this is an active site. Usually it'll be a fairly simple message like this. So, welcome, and check back here at this time. This is when I'll be posting things. Check your school email, because that's one of the issues that we have, is that they forget to check their school email. And it's so critical with these online courses, because that's how we communicate if we need to. And then I also, I always organize my courses where I have what I call a welcome folder, start here. It's about as clear as I can make it. And that's the folder where I put our syllabus. So, but in addition to this message, what I do is I send out an email. In that email, I'll give them a couple of tasks. The very first task is always buy your books, because I find that a lot of them wait until the first day of class to get the syllabus and find out what the book is. And because they don't know how to find that information, and they don't realize it's actually online in the bookstore, you can just look it up. So you don't even have to come on campus, you can actually look it up online. So we'll have that. It will also give links for all the technology that we're going to be using throughout the semester. So Panopto, Zoom. I'm going to send out, I sent this time, actually I just sent this email a couple days ago. I sent one out for VoiceThread too, just to get them oriented to that. And what I'll do is I'll say, please log on and try and download these materials, because in our first live session, which we usually have within the first 2 weeks, I usually have somebody from the IMC come and be ready to answer questions. So that way they've tried it, hopefully. They've tried to download some of those, that software, and they have any questions ready to ask in that first live session, because those live sessions, the time is so precious that we really don't have time to have them downloading them in that moment. And then, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we talked the other day that this is not a self-paced class. Is that correct?
Right, yeah. So I open up, so this is just a sample course without students, but generally for my classes, I'll have all of these weeks hidden. I often even, just because these dates, to me, it's a little bit cumbersome, what I'll do is I'll change them to, like this, I'll label week 1, week 2, week 3, and I'll hide everything except for the week we're currently working in. And what I'll do is, as I get, so online students, they like the flexibility and being able to work ahead, which is great, but I find that they get overwhelmed if I give them too much in the beginning. So I'll usually only open that first week at first, and then I'll maybe open 2 weeks, 3 weeks in advance, and then by about midterm, they're oriented to the course. I'll open up the entire course, and then they can work ahead at their own pace. We do have regular discussions and specific deadlines and specific conversations on specific dates, but it's kind of it's not fully self-paced, but it gives them a chance to work ahead a little bit. The other thing I was just going to show is that, so here's the welcome folder that I have on this introduction page, and that always contains the syllabus and also a timeline for the entire semester. So here's just an example of a timeline where I really outline kind of what's due each week. I've divided it into readings, multimedia, tasks, and then they have a long-term project. And I find this is really helpful for those students who like to work ahead. So even though I haven't, it's this careful balance. So I have students who I open everything and they panic and shut down. And then I have students who, if I don't open things in advance, they can't plan their calendars out. So this is great. This timeline is great for those students who really like to plan out their calendars. And that's what I do. I tell them, if you want to plan ahead, use this timeline. It's likely to change. Everything that's updated goes into Moodle each week, so they still need to check back. But the big ideas, the big projects are not going to change. But I like to be able to make adjustments, so that's why I call it tentative. But the students who feel overwhelmed, I've had some that even this format overwhelms them. I say, just toss that in the trash. So everything is going to be in Moodle. Just follow it week by week, so they can kind of balance those two student needs.
The feedback I'll give you is I also agree students appreciate the detail. They want to know what is expected of them, when is it expected of them, and so I really appreciate the detail that you've put into that. How do you deal with the student that maybe you have one of your live sessions and they're just not able to attend? You record that, provide that to them if they're not able to be there?
Yeah, so if they're not able to attend, so for my undergraduate students are required to attend, so they lose attendance points if they don't. My graduate students, for the most part, most of them I find like to attend and do everything they can to attend. That said, occasionally I do have a student who either can't make any of them at that time or can't make one session. And I want to make sure they get that content, and and I wanted to hold them accountable for watching the Zoom session. So they will watch a recorded version, and I will give them an alternative assignment. Usually that alternative assignment is responding to a discussion forum where I've asked specific questions about what happened during the presentation, as well as given them an opportunity to talk to me about feedback or questions they have or confusions they have, the same things that the students live might have done. And then I grade that and give them basically that as the replacement for their attendance points.
Excellent. Is there some more areas within your course you'd like to share with us, kind of show how it's organized a little more?
Yeah, so I was just going to show a couple of things that I do. So the news forum, I find what I do is I tell students to make sure they check this weekly or daily, and that's where I post all of the important announcements. I find that this is a better format than posting them through email, because sometimes students will have gotten an email from me and then it gets lost, and then they don't have that important information. But if I post all of the important information through the news forum, it's cataloged there, and it's archived there, and they can always go back and find that information. I also force subscription on that news forum, so they're forced to receive those updates via their email, so that they know there's something there. And every so often I'll check, and I'll put a little note in the news forum to give them a task. And if they don't do it, then I know who's actually reading that news forum and who isn't, just a subtle reminder, a gentle reminder. The other thing that I do is I have an instructor question and answer forum that I found is great, because I get a million questions via email, and it's really hard to follow them, and sometimes they're duplicates. So what I've done is I've moved to this format where students, I encourage them to ask all of their questions about the class, unless they're personal or about grades, on this question and answer forum. And then I respond on that forum, and this is another forum that I force subscription on. So students all get to see the questions and the answers, and it helps reduce some of those duplicate questions. And if they ask me a question via email, I'll often say, this is a great question, but I'm not going to answer it here. Can you post it on the instructor and question and answer forum? And I'll respond to it there. I do try and respond to this forum specifically. I check that twice a day. And that is something that that way they can, within 24 hours, they can have a response to their question. I have the student cafe. It's used in some courses more than others. It's not one that I monitor, but it's one where students, I've had students who want to meet for a study session, and then they get on there, or some less course-related issues and more professional development or collaboration type of comments and discussions will go on there. I usually post an introduction about me, some of my background, especially for those new students, just to get to know me, because again, I can give them a brief introduction in class, but it's just another way to help them feel comfortable and know a little bit about who this person is that's teaching them. The other thing on this introduction page that I do is that I post all the major projects, so all the guidelines and everything else, because I find that once they get through the course, if I post guidelines in a specific week, sometimes I can't remember which week it was that I posted those guidelines, and so then they're clicking through all the weeks and they can't find it and they get frustrated. So the major assignments that I have, I post them all on the introduction page. Then kind of week by week, I have a pretty standard format. Again, this is just a sample course, but I have it organized by homework and preparation, any quizzes or assignments, and it's essentially copy and pasted from whatever was on that timeline, that Word document that I posted, that tentative schedule. But I do update things here, so this is real time. So if I find that they need an extra reading, or maybe we had great discussions and I really want to continue something from last week, so I cancel a reading because I want to give more time. It gives me some flexibility to keep this updated. Here's an example. I did video introductions, so this is one of the first courses that students took, so I wanted to, instead of just having them respond in writing, I did video introductions. It served two purposes. One, it was a way for them to introduce themselves and get to know each other, and then they had to write a response, which is why I put it on the wiki, because they were able to post the video link and then respond right in that wiki. But the other thing is because I was going to, in this specific course, have them record lessons and demonstrations using Panopto later on, I wanted to have them practice Panopto in a really low-stress environment where it wasn't graded. If they had problems and it just failed on them, that it wasn't big points. So we got a chance to work out the technical issues. And then quizzes will be posted on here. Any readings that, are just one article readings are posted on there. And that's kind of every week follows that exact same format. I try and keep it pretty consistent so they know what to expect.
You talked about the wiki tool. Is that within Moodle itself, or is that something outside of Moodle?
It's within Moodle. You can actually, it's like a blog type format. And this is a new one, so I haven't created the actual format, but all the students, you can decide, if it's just going to be a group of students who are going to be contributing to this wiki. I can make multiple wikis and have just a few students have access to each one. When I was actually taking classes, I had a professor who, that's where we would post, every student in the class would have a separate wiki. But it's kind of like a blog format. Anyone who has access can adjust it, which actually can be an issue sometimes, I found out, because if they label a file, for instance, program proposal, which was the name of our major assignment, if student A labels it program proposal and student B on his or her page labels it program proposal, it actually will overwrite the previous one. So it was a learning curve because I had students overwriting each other's assignments. So we learned quickly to put initials next to any link that they posted.
The other question I think we talked about the other day is accessibility, ADA compliance. From an instructor perspective, we're sometimes asked to make sure that, students who may have, ADA issues, have you had any things like that you had to address?
Yeah, so I haven't personally had any of those that I've had to address, but it's very plausible that I could in the future. So as I think about what I would do in that case, I would treat it very much like where I have students who teach those lessons. So where I have a student prepare a presentation and teach it, and then I have to upload that video and that discussion, and it takes a lot of preparation for me on my end once it's turned in. And what I do for those is I actually have them turn it in 4 or 5 weeks in advance that their presentation is due, and it gives me time to make the adjustments and technical needs that I need before I post them up to the course. I would say in that case I would do the same thing. It would be an assignment due very early in the course, and then that would give me time to get closed captioning or anything that I needed on it. That's the immediate answer that I would have to that. I don't know, there might be better ones.
Sure. You know, all of us deal with this, but do you have approaches or techniques on plagiarism and cheating or anything like that in your online courses?
So so most of my courses, I think that I do a couple of different things. One is most of the projects that they do are very specific to their districts and their situations. So the information that are in those projects really, unless they're a teacher teaching in the same classroom or same district, it's really the uniqueness of it, of being able to apply it in the field, allows me to ensure that's unique material. Now, when it comes to quizzes, I do some basic things like I put a time limit on it, make sure that the questions are shuffled and that the answers are shuffled. When I'm working with my undergraduate students, I'm really careful about when the answers are shown or if they're shown at all. And that is something that I struggle with. In terms of really short assignments, and again, that can be duplicated fairly easily, and this is again more with my undergraduate students, I have used Turnitin before to kind of build that database, because we do have some projects that every semester it's a pretty standard format and that could be duplicated, and we really wouldn't know because it doesn't have that identifying information in it.
Student feedback, you talked about that. Do you use any rubrics or any tools within the LMS to do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I definitely have always posted like Word document rubrics with using in Moodle. I actually have just started using the rubric feature, and it's pretty helpful. Every so often, if you get a rubric that has too many columns on it, it actually will be, you have to scroll over, to find it. And that can be a problem because I had one student, for instance, who couldn't figure out her grade, but it was because she thought she had received the highest grade because it was the highest column she could actually see and she hadn't moved over. So that is a complication that I'm not too fond of, but I do, rate discussion posts. That's helpful. It speeds up grading. We have a function where you could enter a score in the gradebook, or within the actual discussion post, you can actually set, between 1 and 4, and then I can go in and rate it. And I give them a separate rubric on, like a Word document, a PDF, that shows what those ratings are. And so those are some of the tools I use within Moodle.
Well, I have one more question, then I'll see if there's any questions from the audience. You talked about the positives and some of the things, in your online course. Why did you decide to teach online? What was the reason that you decided to do this?
Well, I think that, for our program, it's the only option. So I teach teach courses for English language learners, and the program we offer is 100% online. And I love the subject area, and so I'm most concerned with the subject area. But I think that, in terms of why I enjoy teaching online now, after it was kind of set up for me, but why I enjoy it is because it works for my students. They're teachers, they're working full time, they have families, most of them, and many of them are, not close to a university. Teaching is a tiring job, so driving somewhere and taking evening classes is really hard. So it's a way to get that training out there that the teachers really need, and in a way that they can actually accomplish it. So I think that is the very core of why online works, is because it gets education to the people who want it and don't have another option. They can't quit their jobs and quit their families. So, yeah.
Well, Nick, do we have any chat questions going on? Or maybe Nick or the rest of you, any questions?
No questions that I can see so far.
Well, that's not any fun. Come on, Nick. Don't you have a question?
No, actually, she's done a great job. She's answering questions that I have.
I will agree. You've done an excellent job. One of the things that, what would you, if you have a faculty member that's thinking about teaching online, what would be some of the things you might, recommend to them to think about, before they jump in? Is there anything, Dr. Johnson, you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I had taken a couple online classes as a graduate student, but the first time I taught online, it was a little bit overwhelming. And so I think that there are a few pieces of advice that I would have. One is to keep it simple to start. I love trying new things, and sometimes I'm okay with a little bit of chaos, but my students are not. So what I've learned very quickly is that I had to just add one component at a time, so that where I'd see all these great tools I wanted to use and incorporate into the class, when I incorporated it all at once and hadn't quite tested it out before I put it into the course, it caused more stress and chaos than probably was necessary. The other thing that's, I think, really important is that you really have to manage your time well, because just like on the student side, it's really easy to not check into a course for a week, and then you have a lot of discussion posts and grading that's built up, and it can really set you behind quickly. So I really have had to make sure that I set aside time a couple times a week where I check in and I do some grading periodically. I want to give students feedback, and I'm really good about the daily questions and daily feedback, but some of those long assignments, sometimes it would get initially pushed off, and it always ended up bad. So, and I think too, just I can't stress enough how important that face-to-face interaction is. Whenever I had a student who was stressed and doing poorly in class, to get them on the phone and talk to them, to get them on Zoom, or even I've had students where I've driven down to Kansas City from St. Joe, where we are, and met with them at a coffee shop. We have this favorite coffee shop that I go to, periodically with students, just to check in and make sure that they're set, and if they're struggling to find something. So I think that it's less stress on your side, it's less stress on their side, and it makes for a much more pleasant experience. So.
Well, those are all great reasons. I want to jump right in there and start teaching right away. One of the things that I'm responsible for is teaching our faculty here on our campus. And I think you're right. You don't have to do lots of things. You don't have to use every tool in your toolbox that first time that you teach that class. Sometimes breaking it down into small, sizable things to do forward. So, I know you do all that. From what I've seen, looks like you do a great job. Nick, are there any more questions that we have out there?
No other questions at this time. Sorry, Ed.
Well, I'd like to thank you again, Dr. Johnson, for agreeing to visit with us today. Every time I hear and participate in one of these sessions, I think I learn a little bit of something. We have recorded this session, and we'll be providing this link out on our KCREACH website. And so we hope that you look at Dr. Johnson's recording and others that we've done in the past. And if there aren't any other questions, thank you again, Dr. Johnson, for agreeing to visit with us today.
Yeah, thank you. And I look forward to any suggestions anybody has out there or questions they have for me, then I'm happy to answer them later too.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording, and let me see if I know how to do that. Actually,